She looked straight into the camera, tears pooling in her eyes, and cried that she wasn't treated like a real sibling. It was one of the most heartbreaking, raw moments we've ever seen from Breanna Brown. If you watched that scene, your heart probably shattered for her. You probably thought of how cruel the older Brown kids were being, completely icing out their adopted sister. But what if the true story of who snubbed Breanna and exactly why they did it is much darker than a simple family misunderstanding? What if the cameras completely missed the actual catalyst for this devastating family split? Because before we can even begin to reveal the secret text message that broke the family apart forever, we need to talk about what was really going on behind the scenes. We need to go back to Gwendlyn's engagement party, and we need to look at the digital trail of betrayal that never made it to television. You remember the narrative the show tried to feed us, right? Sister Wives painted a picture of a family naturally drifting apart under the immense, crushing weight of Kody's COVID-19 protocols. They wanted you to believe that the older children, Christine and Janelle's kids, just couldn't get along with Robyn and her children anymore. It was framed as a tragedy of biology and distance. But by the end of this video, you will understand why Breanna Brown was really shut out, and it will completely change how you've been thinking about this family for the last 3 years. We are going to unpack the deeply hidden layers of the sibling dynamic that TLC didn't want you to see. You are going to learn about the off-camera group chat explosion, the shocking spy allegations that tore through the Brown family tree, and the exact moment the older boys decided they could never trust Breanna again. I'm going to promise you right now, the final payoff of this story changes everything. Once you know the contents of the secret text message exchange that ultimately ruined everything, Robyn's tears will look entirely different to you. Kody's sheer rage toward his older biological children will suddenly make terrifying sense. And Breanna's heartbreaking confession to the cameras? You'll realize it wasn't just a cry for love. It was a carefully constructed defense mechanism. But to truly grasp the magnitude of this off-camera betrayal, we have to start at the foundation of Breanna's fragile place in this massive, chaotic family. To understand why the sibling fracture hit Breanna so hard, you have to take yourself back to the very beginning of her story on Sister Wives. Breanna wasn't born into this chaotic, sprawling, polygamist empire. She, along with her siblings Aurora and Dayton, were brought into it when Robyn married Kody. For years, the narrative was all about blending. Do you remember those early seasons? The family went out of their way to show how seamless the integration was. But here is a shocking fact that many casual viewers completely forget. Kody legally divorced his first wife, Mary, specifically so he could legally adopt Robyn's kids. Wait, what? Yes, he legally restructured his entire family hierarchy, displacing his original legal wife, just to solidify Breanna, Aurora, and Dayton as his legal dependents. Can you imagine the psychological impact that had on the older biological children? How do you think it felt for teenagers like Logan, Hunter, Garrison, and Gabe to watch their father literally rewrite his legal obligations for a brand new set of kids? Did they secretly resent it from day one? For a long time, the kids put on a brave face. They smiled for the TLC cameras. They posed for the giant family photos. They played the part of the big, happy, blended family perfectly. But under the surface, the foundational cracks were already there. Breanna carries incredibly deep, complex wounds around her family identity. Being adopted into a family of over a dozen established siblings is intimidating enough. But being adopted into a family where your mother is universally perceived both by the viewers and eventually the other wives as the favorite, that places a massive, invisible target on your back. Fast forward to Gwendlyn Brown's engagement party. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a time to celebrate love and family unity. Yet, when you looked around the room, the absence was deafening. Robyn's entire side of the family was nowhere to be found. Not Robyn, not Kody, and certainly not Breanna. It was a glaringly obvious fracture that could no longer be hidden by clever editing or PR spin. The viewers immediately assumed this was just the older kids hating Robyn. It's the easiest explanation, isn't it? Robyn is the villain of the show, therefore her children are punished by association. That was the narrative Breanna herself pushed when she cried on camera about not being treated like a real sibling. She framed it as though she was collateral damage in a war between the wives. But what if she wasn't collateral damage at all? What if she was an active participant in the war? If you think Gwendlyn's party was the incident that broke the family, you are looking in the completely wrong place. The real fracture didn't happen at a party, and it wasn't about wedding invitations. The true severance happened months earlier, on a small digital screen late at night when the TLC cameras were completely turned off. Let's talk about the pandemic. The COVID-19 rules that Kody implemented didn't just keep the family physically apart. They created a psychological pressure cooker that eventually blew the roof off the entire Brown family dynamic. We all saw the screaming matches on television. We saw Kody demand absolute loyalty. We saw Garrison and Gabe push back, begging for a relationship with their father that wasn't dictated by Robyn's arbitrary sanitation rules. But the cameras only showed us the arguments that happened in front of Kody and Janelle. What about the conversations happening between the siblings themselves? What happens when 24 young adults and teenagers are trapped in their respective homes, communicating solely through massive, sprawling iMessage group chats? According to sources on Twitter and deep dive Reddit theories that have been circulating among sister wives insiders, the sibling group chats during this time, it was a minefield. The older kids, Christine and Janelle's broods, were reportedly venting their immense frustrations. They were angry at Kody. They were furious with Robyn. And they were using this private digital space to let off steam about the sheer absurdity of their living situation. But here's where the story takes a massive, untelevised turn. What if those private sibling chats weren't private at all? Rumors have been heavily swirling online that during the absolute height of the family's COVID-19 drama, Breanna was allegedly acting as a spy for Robyn and Kody. Wait, what? A spy? Yes. According to anonymous sources claiming to have direct connections to the older siblings, Breanna was allegedly taking screenshots of the older kids venting in the group chat and feeding them directly back to Robyn. Why would she do that? Was she trying to protect her mother from the harsh words of her step-siblings? Or was she, perhaps subconsciously, trying to secure her spot as Kody's loyal, favorite daughter, while the rest of the family was in open rebellion? Think about the psychological manipulation at play here. Kody was demanding absolute, unquestioning loyalty. He made it clear that anyone who defied the rules were dead to him. In that terrifyingly toxic environment, can you really blame a teenager for doing whatever it takes to stay in her father's good graces? Did Breanna think she was doing the right thing by exposing the older kids' disloyalty? Whatever her motivations were, the fallout was catastrophic. An anonymous source stated that a massive, explosive group chat confrontation occurred completely off camera. In this text thread, the older kids allegedly set a trap. They realized their private complaints were miraculously making their way back to Kody's ears, almost verbatim. They started putting the puzzle pieces together. When the realization hit, the confrontation was brutal. One of the older boys, heavily rumored by fans to be either Gabe or Garrison, given their openly volatile relationship with Kody at the time, allegedly cornered Breanna in the chat. He accused her of twisting their words. He told her that she was actively manipulating the narrative to make them look like villains to their own father. Can you imagine the sheer panic Breanna must have felt in that moment? To be called out in front of all your siblings, accused of being a mole for the very women they all resented? We are going to dive into the exact words allegedly exchanged in that explosive group chat. We are going to explore the devastating text message that finally forced the older kids to block Breanna's number for good. But to understand why those specific words hit Breanna so hard, you have to realize what Kody was telling her behind closed doors, while the rest of the family burned to the ground. When Breanna was confronted by the older boys, she didn't just apologize. She didn't try to explain herself. According to the deep dive theories, she did exactly what she had been trained to do. She ran crying to Robyn. She painted herself as the ultimate victim of a cruel, unprovoked attack by the older biological kids. And that is the exact moment the divide became permanent. The older kids realized a devastating truth. Breanna wasn't just a quiet sister caught in the crossfire. She was an active agent in Kody's game of loyalty and punishment. They felt they could no longer trust her with even the most basic information about their lives. If they invited her to a party, would she report back to Kody on who was drinking? If they confided in her about their struggles, would it be weaponized against their mothers? The trust wasn't just broken, it was vaporized. So they made the incredibly painful decision to cut the cord. They shut her out. They stopped replying to her messages. They stopped inviting her to family gatherings. They built a wall around themselves to protect their own sanity from Kody and Robyn's endless surveillance. So when you sit on your couch and watch Breanna cry on TLC about not being a real sibling, it is incredibly easy to feel pity. The producers edited it perfectly with sad music and lingering shots of her tear-stained face. But if these Reddit rumors hold even a shred of truth, the older kids didn't reject her because of her DNA. They didn't ice her out because they hate adopted children. They rejected her because she was playing a dangerous, highly manipulative game, and they refused to be pawns in it anymore. Welcome back to the fallout. You now know the yet highly plausible spy theory that completely reframes the sibling dynamic. But where does that leave Breanna today? Let's look at the present situation, because what is happening right now is arguably even more tragic than the initial split. Currently, Breanna is still firmly planted inside Kody and Robyn's sprawling Flagstaff compound. While the older biological kids have scattered across the country getting married, having children of their own, buying houses, and building massive social media followings, Breanna's world has shrunk to the size of a single property line. Have you ever noticed how invisible she has become? Wait, what? Yes, while Janelle and Christine's kids are out doing lucrative brand deals, launching Patreon accounts, and living their authentic lives out loud, Breanna and Aurora are essentially living like ghosts. They have zero public-facing social media presence. They don't give independent interviews. They are completely, utterly locked down inside Robyn's tightly controlled ecosystem. Why is that? Is it just a preference for privacy? Or is it a direct consequence of the shattered trust we just talked about? You have to wonder what it feels like for Breanna to watch her former siblings thrive without her. Does she ever sit in her room and regret her alleged role in the group chat drama? Let's talk about Gwendlyn and Paedon for a second, because their recent actions add massive weight to these Reddit rumors. Over the last couple of years, both Gwendlyn and Paedon have taken to the internet to speak their unvarnished truth. Gwendlyn actually launched a Patreon where she watched and reacted to Sister Wives episodes in real time. And her reaction to Breanna's on-camera tears? It was shockingly cold. She didn't offer a single shred of sympathy. Now, think about that. Does that sound like a sister who just drifted apart from her sibling due to annoying COVID rules? Or does that sound like a woman who knows she was actively betrayed? If Gwendlyn knew that Breanna was the mole, the one sending screenshots of their private frustrations to Kody, her lack of empathy suddenly makes absolute chilling sense. Why would you cry for the girl who handed the executioner his axe? This brings us to a crucial turning point in the family's current reality. The older kids aren't just ignoring Breanna, they are actively protecting their peace. You probably noticed that when Christine got married to David Woolley, the guest list was heavily scrutinized by fans. All the older kids were there, celebrating, laughing, and taking those big, beautiful, blended family photos. Who wasn't there? Breanna. It wasn't an oversight. It was a heavily enforced boundary. But here is a surprising fact that most people gloss over. Kody has actually weaponized Breanna's isolation against the other kids. Wait, what? Exactly. Kody has repeatedly gone on camera and stated that the older kids are jerks for not including Robyn's children. He uses Breanna's tears as undeniable proof that Janelle and Christine's kids are the bullies. He flips the script entirely. By making Breanna the ultimate victim, he entirely absolves himself of the damage his blatant favoritism caused. Do you see the massive manipulation at play here? Can you understand why the older siblings refuse to engage? If every single interaction they have with Breanna is going to be analyzed, twisted, and reported back to Kody to be used as ammunition on national television, the only winning move is not to play. They had to cut her off to starve Kody of his leverage. It's a brutal, harsh reality. But what would you do if your own sister betrayed you to your dad? Would you keep texting her? Would you invite her to your wedding? Or would you block her number and never look back? The silence from the older siblings is deafening, but it is also their armor. And as Breanna sits in that giant house, surrounded only by Robyn's biological children, you have to wonder if the realization of what she lost has finally set in. She traded 24 siblings for the approval of one man. Was it worth it? I know you are waiting for the exact contents of the text message that caused this permanent block. You want to know the exact words that were allegedly typed out in the heat of that group chat explosion. We are getting so close to that final piece of the puzzle, and I promise you, the phrasing is going to leave your jaw on the floor. But before we reveal the message that ruined everything, we have to look at the hidden details fans just uncovered this week. This brings us to what the hardcore fandom is currently dissecting. Fandoms are like digital detectives, and the Sister Wives community is unmatched when it comes to analyzing micro-expressions and background details. Recently, a massive thread exploded on Reddit regarding a highly specific detail from an older episode that we all completely missed. Some sources suggest that the tension between Breanna and the older boys didn't just start during COVID. The Reddit threads this week are pointing to a hidden pattern of behavior that was right in front of our faces the entire time. If you go back and watch the background footage of family gatherings pre-pandemic, pay close attention to Gabe and Garrison's body language when Breanna enters the room. They don't just ignore her, they physically pivot away. What does that tell you? It tells us that the foundation of distrust was already poured long before Kody ever printed out his ridiculous list of COVID rules. The pandemic didn't create the spy, it just gave the spy her first major assignment. And the older kids? They already knew she was watching them. So how did they finally catch her red-handed? How did they prove to the rest of the siblings that Breanna was the leak? It involved a digital trap, a calculated lie, and a screenshot that sent shockwaves through the entire family tree. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the explosion was about to decimate the Brown family forever. But to fully grasp the brilliance and the tragedy of how the older kids exposed the mole, you need to hear the exact sequence of events that led up to the final text. Are you ready to see what was actually typed in that chat? Are you prepared to look at the final, fatal blow to Breanna's relationship with her siblings? To understand exactly how the older kids finally caught Breanna red-handed, we have to look at the digital trap they allegedly set. For months, the older boys had suspected that their deeply private frustrations were being meticulously packaged and delivered straight to Robyn's doorstep. But suspicion isn't proof. If they were going to accuse their adopted sister of being Kody's personal informant, they needed undeniable, foolproof evidence. So according to heavily circulated deep dive Reddit theories from insiders close to the family, they orchestrated a test. The older kids, led allegedly by Gabe and Garrison, planted a completely fabricated story in the massive sibling group chat. They casually dropped a fake rumor into the conversation, claiming that one of the boys had blatantly broken one of Kody's most unhinged, specific COVID rules. The rumor was that Gabe had secretly gone to a massive, crowded indoor gathering and was actively planning to swing by Robyn's house later that week to drop off some boxes. Wait, what? Yes, a total calculated lie. Gabe hadn't gone to any party, and he had absolutely zero intention of going anywhere near Robyn's property. The story was designed purely as bait. It was a radioactive piece of gossip that only a highly motivated spy would dare to touch. Can you imagine the adrenaline pumping through the older kids' veins as they hit send that message? They sat back and watched the red receipts roll in. They waited in the digital silence. Would the bait be taken? Less than 24 hours later, the trap snapped shut. Kody allegedly called the boys in an absolute unhinged rage. He was screaming through the phone, demanding to know why they were trying to infect his household. And the detail that gave it all away? Kody specifically referenced the crowded indoor gathering and the boxes. He repeated the exact verbatim phrases that had only ever been typed inside that supposedly secure sibling group chat. The older kids had their proof. The leak was real. And by process of elimination, looking at who read the messages and who was currently living under Kody's roof, there was only one possible culprit: Breanna. How do you even begin to process that level of betrayal? Your own sister, weaponizing your private conversations to ensure you remain alienated from your father? The older kids didn't scream. They didn't call Kody back to argue. Instead, they took a screenshot of the fake story they had planted, and they took it straight back to the group chat. What happens when the ultimate betrayal is permanently captured in a screenshot? You get the exact moment a family permanently shatters. This brings us to the promise I made you at the very beginning of this video. The secret text message that ruined everything. The exact words that forced the older kids to block Breanna's number, resulting in her completely empty, isolated life today. When the boys realized Breanna had run straight to Robyn with the fake story, they didn't hold back. According to the insider leaks, one of the older brothers dropped the screenshot of their trap into the main sibling chat and tagged Breanna directly. He exposed the fact that the party never happened. He exposed the fact that it was a loyalty test. And he exposed the terrifying reality that she had failed it spectacularly. Then came the final, devastating text message. The older brother allegedly typed, "We know it was you. Hope Dad's approval was worth it because you just lost your real siblings. Stop spying and don't ever contact us again." Let those words sink in for a second. Hope Dad's approval was worth it. Can you imagine the sheer panic that must have washed over Breanna's face as she read that? To be publicly stripped of your cover in front of every single sibling you have ever desperately wanted to fit in with? She couldn't deny it. The proof was undeniable. She had been caught twisting their words, playing Kody's twisted game of favoritism, and she had single-handedly destroyed the very sibling bond she would later cry about on national television. When Breanna ran crying to Robyn about this text message, Robyn didn't hold her accountable. Of course she didn't. Robyn took one look at that brutal text and immediately weaponized it. She used it to convince Kody that the older biological kids were abusive, cruel bullies who hated Breanna for no reason. And Kody? He believed Robyn. He always believes Robyn. So the next time you rewatch that heartbreaking TLC scene, the one where Breanna looks straight into the lens and cries that she isn't treated like a real sibling, ask yourself a hard question. Is she crying because she was unfairly shut out? Or is she crying because she got caught playing a highly manipulative game and the consequences of her own actions have finally left her completely alone? The older kids didn't reject her because of her DNA. They rejected her because she chose to be a spy in a house divided. But here is the ultimate unresolved question that the cameras never answered. What exactly did Kody do to the older boys the moment he saw that final text message? Because if you think Kody just let his biological sons banish his favorite adopted daughter without a fight, you are entirely underestimating the wrath of Kody Brown. The retaliation he planned against Gabe and Garrison is arguably the darkest thing he has ever done on television. If you want to know what happened next, and how Kody tried to legally punish the boys for exposing Breanna, that story is already uploaded. Click right here.